Hello, this is Rachel from 7 and All, and today I am going to be bringing you an honest review of kindergarten math with confidence now that we have completely finished this level of this math curriculum. This is going to be my review of our experience, and I'm going to be weaving in some tips for implementing this program throughout the review, as well as some general tips and thoughts on teaching early elementary math. All right, now spoiler alert, which is probably not much of a spoiler if you have been watching my channel throughout the year, but I liked this program a lot. That's my summary review of it. I really liked it. However, there are some things that you should know. One, I was using kindergarten math with confidence with a pre-K student for his pre-K year. A pre-Ker who is rather math inclined, math interested, has a natural knack or interest in numbers. Not that he's super advanced, but just he is interested in numbers, and that was a very good decision. I do not think I would have been nearly as happy with this program if I had been waiting until this coming kindergarten year to use it with him. That is my first tip when it comes to this program and any. Don't be too overly concerned with the grade level on the cover. Place your child according to their ability, their learning stage right now. You can do this by looking at the scope and sequence, looking at sample pages, and judging, is my child ready for this? Is my child ready for these activities? Place your actual child by what they actually can do and actually need to learn versus just going by the grade level on the cover. In many, many curriculums, you will have better satisfaction if you follow that guideline. Because sometimes you might be going with grade level and sometimes you won't be going with grade level. And for my son, going 1 year ahead in grade level was a perfect fit for him. Now, what does this program involve? This math program involves the teacher guide, the student workbook, as well as you are going to need to create your own math box. They don't sell manipulatives specifically for this program, which I tend to like because she's a little bit more minimalist, but you do use hands-on manipulatives. And you'll kind of be creating some of your own throughout the year. On that note, here's a tip for one of the manipulatives. You're going to be using a lot of index cards throughout the year, and you'll be making different sets of index cards. I've got a couple mixed up together here, 2 sets of 0 through 10 cards. And you also make tally marks cards and lots of different cards. Anyways, this is my tip, which I didn't do, but I would suggest when you first start making these sets of cards, maybe rubber band them, maybe put them in envelopes, something to separate out your sets of cards, because you might find that over time you have like 50, 60 different cards. So you've got your tally marks, you've got your numbers, you've got all these different things, and you're using them and reusing them for games and they get a little bit mixed up. So I would say right from the beginning, just separate them with your rubber bands or your envelopes, and that will help you stay a little bit more organized going through. You also use a few other manipulatives like pattern blocks and play money, which were always a huge hit in our lessons. One more totally optional element of the program is picture books, math-related storybooks. I purchased a few of the ones that were on the list, just a fraction, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 out of the 30 mentioned, but those were a great addition to our year. We have discovered that we really, really like including math picture books into our morning time, story time, and I'm really glad to have those math picture book recommendations because it's not something that I think I naturally would have stumbled upon, the idea of reading math-related picture books. Now, the number one question that I tend to get asked about this program and other programs is, do I really need to buy the teacher book, or can I just get away with using the student workbook? And with this program specifically, the answer is 100% no. It is not at all worth it to use it as a workbook-only curriculum. The workbook is not the meat of the program. The teacher's book, the hefty, thick teacher's book, is the meat of the program. So you will need the teacher's book, and actually I would say, this is perhaps an unpopular opinion, but in most cases with early math, a teacher book is probably going to be helpful to help you extend the lesson beyond just the simple workbook page. It's my opinion there. They tend to be worth it unless it really is just a book of answers. But any teacher guide worth its salt will be more than just a book of answers. But you have your teacher guide. There is a lot of great stuff in here. I highly recommend actually read your teacher guide. After all, you spent the money on it. The author put all the effort into putting this info in here. There's a lot of good info. There are weekly introductions to each week where they'll have tips on teaching math, or they'll have explanations of why this concept, why this skill is important that we're working on this week. She has suggestions for weaving math into everyday life. So every week there are these great ideas, and it wasn't that I would necessarily use every idea for weaving math into everyday life, but it was inspirational for me to see of like, oh, when we're doing this, we are using math. Yeah, that makes sense. Or, hey, I can just have more natural math and number conversations with my kids throughout the days. I did find it great and educational because I have not been someone who's naturally wired and super passionate about math. I'm good at math, I just never found it super exciting. But having this guide was very helpful. Then you have your lesson. Each lesson has 3 parts: a review or warm-up, quick activity. Then you have your teaching activity for the day, and then you end, and maybe sometimes there might be like 2 related activities. But that's your active lesson. Then you end with doing the workbook. And the child at kindergarten level may not be able to completely independently do the workbook because they probably can't read the instructions, but the workbook pages are very simple, and for the most part, this will be the easiest part of the lesson. What your child is being expected to do in the activities is going to be more challenging than what they're expected to do in the workbook. So I do want to mention that because a lot of people see this workbook and they think, wow, that's super way too easy. I'm like, the workbook is pretty easy, but the amount of thought process and the amount of reasoning that goes into some of these activities actually is pretty challenging. So yes, this is a teacher-intensive program, which I think is very appropriate to teaching math at a kindergarten stage. This is not really the stage of education where you're going to see highly independent programs. This is something where you want to be interactive and involved with your child to make sure that they're really gaining a very solid understanding. So I think it's very appropriate that it's teacher-intensive, but you should also be aware because based on your own real-life circumstances, you might not have time to fully implement all parts of the lesson, and I do think for this program to be most successful, you do pretty much need to implement all the parts. We need those reviews and those teaching activities because that's where the real action is happening and the real work is happening. So this does tend to introduce certain concepts fairly quickly. And you might think at first, in the first week where it's taught, you don't really have enough time for your child to master the topic. However, I would not be afraid of that for 2 reasons. One, we have those handy-dandy review activities. So anything that you've learned is cycling back through into your lessons again and again. You're working on patterns again. You're working on shapes again. You're working on pairs that make 10 again. So those things cycle back in the review activities. And 2, this applies to kindergarten learning in general, kindergarten math in general. I wouldn't be overly concerned about full, solid mastery of skills really at the kindergarten math level. I mean, if your child's not getting it at all, that's one concern. But if your child is writing a number backward once in a while, or if they are forgetting the pairs that make 10 or taking a while to really remember them, or if they're not quite sure of the order of the months of the year, that's totally fine, that's totally normal and natural. And every foundational concept that is taught in kindergarten is going to come up again and again for the rest of their lives, but it's really going to come up again and again in 1st grade and in 2nd grade. So yes, if your child isn't understanding the concept of addition at all, that's where you would have a problem. But if it's more like sometimes your child still needs counters to add, that's totally fine, that's very, very natural. You don't necessarily have to have them have all of their addition facts, their basic addition facts memorized, or have them be able to do mental math instantly. You don't have to expect that by the end of kindergarten. Some kids will be, they'll catch on and they're going to remember these combos very quickly, and other kids, it might stretch more on into 1st and 2nd grade where they still need some more help from the counters or manipulatives. So every kid is going to have a slightly different relationship with this early learning. but you don't have to expect everything to be 100% mastered that's taught in kindergarten. Now, my other caveat that I want to add, for those who've watched my channel, you already know this, but if you're new, you might not know, we also did a second math curriculum. This is fairly normal for my family. We tend to have an idea of why stop at one math curriculum. I come from a rather math-loving family, and especially in the early years, math curriculums tend to be, justifiably, just a small amount of work. So if my son and I are finishing a Math with Confidence complete lesson in 15 minutes, it was no hardship at all to add in Math UC and to have him just do a workbook page front and back in Math UC in maybe 4 minutes or less, because those are also very short workbook pages. Now, a lot of people will ask me, do I think that it's necessary to add on a second curriculum if you're using Math with Confidence? And I would not say that. No, I wouldn't say it's necessary. However, the is it necessary is not really a guiding question for my own homeschool. It's just not necessarily one of my big priorities in education, is to think, is this necessary? There can be times when you need to focus on only what's necessary. But for now, in my own homeschool, with my particular student, with my stage of life, I don't need to focus on that as my guiding goal. And I do think that adding in the second curriculum, adding in the Math UC, did give my son just so many opportunities to practice and build his fluency in addition, subtraction, and in writing numbers correctly. So do I say it's necessary? No. But I do think that having the extra workbook practice for a kid who enjoys workbooks and doesn't push back on workbooks at all, I do think that that did improve his fluency to have that extra practice. So that's just something else to think about in your math planning. All right, I hope that this review was helpful for you. If you have any other questions, please leave them down below. I'm always happy to chat with you in the comments. And subscribe for more nerdy homeschool videos. I'll be seeing you. Bye.